what is going on? No horsing around. Family, Zach Boyd, Stephen Burton, Drake Wally back at it again on another Wednesday live stream. And guys, we want to lighten up the mood tonight. We talked so much about, coaches and quarterbacks and all of this good stuff. Let's get into a little bit of free agency talk, right? As you're going to see on that thumbnail, Lamar Jackson will be a topic that we'll talk about. Just want to be very transparent with this. He is a big name free agent. That's why we decided to throw him on the thumbnail. We'll go around the table here, and I guess let's just start there, and then we'll get into kind of position by position of what we think. I, for one, am probably team let's just draft a quarterback. Lamar is awful tempting. There's no doubt about it. I'm not sure that the Ravens are even willing to even let that even be a possibility when it comes right down to it. But that being said, he's an electric football player. But for me, tempting, but I'm still drafting a quarterback. We'll start with, I guess, Drake from the Horseshoe Huddle podcast. Drake, thanks for hopping on. And we all know how you are about AR-15. Lamar Jackson kind of falls into that some umbrella. My friend, you have the floor. Are you trading for him, or are you team let's just draft?
Man, it would be great, and I know that we've heard, they're having contract disputes, and there's money being left on the table in this. Well, that's just part of it. That's all part of this. They're still working things out. I personally, I think the Ravens would be ridiculously stupid to let that guy go to another team when all he really needs is a couple of weapons at wide receiver to make up for Hollywood Brown going to the Cardinals. It would be great for the Colts, but I, for one, as you are, Zach, I'm right there with just draft a quarterback, bring in somebody new who you can mold right out of the gate. And he doesn't know anything other than college and now the Colts franchise with Shane Steichen.
What say you, Stephen Burton?
I'm the same. Your odds are, we all hope odds are, right, that we're not picking this high again, that you're not picking this high. You're this high. You've kind of, I know we're not going to talk a lot about it, but the coaching staff you're putting in place is really strong for a young quarterback to come in to help develop them. And I think on a side note, like I'm Zach knows this, and entire, I guess it's Ravens flock knows this from a few years ago. Like, I'm not a massive fan of Lamar Jackson.
This is true.
It's just he's not finished the season. The last two seasons, the kind of money that you see that's being floated out there for him, the kind of draft capital you're going to have to use to go get him.
Yeah.
I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan of it. I'd rather, like you said, Drake, pick our guy and mold him from the beginning, and you get him on that rookie contract too. You're not paying, what is it, $200 million, $300 million for 6 years or whatever it's going to be for him. So I'm actually team. I'm with you guys. I'm team draft.
Okay.
Slightly for a different reason, just because I'm not super high on Lamar Jackson anyway.
Yeah, man. Let's ask the chat as well, guys. Feel free to chime in and comment as we go along. We'll try our best to interact with you. Just want to take a quick second to thank every one of you guys who've already jumped into this thing, getting it started off right. Blue Nation says he wants C.J. Stroud or Anthony Richardson. Lots of time to debate that for sure. Tonight's going to be mostly free agency centric for the people who are just now tuning in. And we're going to start at a position. I'm not so sure that they're going to actually dive in on this position, but it's loaded. When you want to look at the most talented free agency crop, I think you got to start with the tight end, guys. I really do. I think you've got a lot of really, really, really good players. As Steven's pulling that up, I mean, you got guys like, obviously, the guy who's on here, Dalton Schultz, is going to be a free agent. Evan Ingram, we all saw what he did against us and in the playoffs, as well as you got Mike Gesicki, Hayden Hurst, Austin Hooper. Of those guys, just curious, do any of them, if you talk about the top three, when you talk about Schultz, Ingram, and who's number three on that list? We got
Gesicki.
They're probably going to ask for a lot of money and probably going to get a lot of money. Any of those guys, to you, does it make sense to bring them in? I mean, we've obviously got a young tight end core. You love what you see with Jelani, and you love the idea of what Shane Steichen can do with Jelani Woods. Colin Granson as well. You got, Ogletree, who's going to come back off of a bad injury, should be ready to go because he got hurt so early on. You guys going to roll with the tight ends that we have? Or would you be intrigued to say, man, one of these guys would look really, really good considering what he did with Dallas Goedert, over there in Philadelphia? Drake, what are you thinking, man?
Well, they obviously have got Woods, and he's going to have to improve his blocking because that's the one thing that was really missing from the Colts tight end position. But he just also wasn't on the field enough to really show it. But Granson's more of a slot guy. He's not really a blocker. And then Ogletree, yes, he was exciting because of his blocking. That's what everyone was freaking out about. This guy could block anybody. But they're all pretty young, they're all pretty unheralded at this point. A guy, honestly, like Hayden Hurst might ask for a little bit more money. The two guys that really stick out to me are actually Austin Hooper and Foster Moreau. And the reason that they do is because they can block. Those guys can block very well, especially Moreau, being more of a Jack Doyle type of build. I think that he would fit nicely. And, you also have to mention Mo Alley Cox. He's on a 3-year, $18 million contract that does not warrant the play that he has shown.
Sure.
But also he's been in a quarterback carousel. So I think that with Tom Manning coming in, he loves himself some Mo. So, I mean, it's really going to hinge on what they're going to do with him. But I really think that they need a veteran blocking tight end who can support the ground game with a rookie.
I totally agree with that. Stephen Burton, thoughts? Are you tempted but say no? Or are you going to say, you know what, this might be really, really nice in this Shane Steichen led offense?
So I'm tempted. There are some names, and I love the names Drake's mentioned, right? But I'm probably gonna say no, only because I'm interested to see where the room goes, like what you have in the room. I think you're looking at potentially, you're looking at. I think we all think Jelani's gonna have a big year. He's probably that Dallas Goedert type that that's what we're looking at, right? Yeah. Ogletree, it's a great point. I think he showed a ton. He is coming off of an injury. How long is it going to take him to get back up to speed? But I think for me, looking kind of into free agency, there are other more pressing holes than probably the tight end position that I feel that they need to address.
Yeah, man. I mean, it makes good sense to me. I just thought it was worthy bringing up just because of how, especially at the top of that tight end class, you might even see Chris Ballard wait till, late in that draft and really just go find that blocker. Maybe a guy who's not really known to be a pass catcher. Drake alluded to it earlier, that Jack Doyle type, the guy who's literally just hat on hat and can really help that offensive line. As we've all seen that offensive line, slowly regress since he decided to abruptly retire. Next position we'll talk about is going to be interior offensive line. And I think this is probably a little more realistic, right? Like we all know right guard, we need, we had so much trouble on that side. And our offensive line, let's just be honest, regardless of the big names, they just weren't very good last year. I mean, they just were not very good. As Steven goes ahead and gets that linked up, I believe we had someone comment earlier on this player, and I wanted to go over with them and give them a little shout out. Let's see here. If I can go all the way back up. Okay. Right there. Give me Isaac Simola, and that makes a lot of sense. And that's the first person I want to talk about. Obviously, the connection, Philadelphia Eagles. He played very, very well, minus that untimely false start that he had in the Super Bowl. But, I mean, by and large, how can you gripe about the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line this year? I mean, they were probably the best offensive line in the NFL, and might be nice to poach the Philadelphia Eagles, knowing what you got there. There's not a lot of guesswork. All he's got to do is ask Shane Steichen, what type of guy is he? What type of leader? What type of player is he? You got all the in-house answers right there. So for me, that's probably where I would start if you really want to be a big spender. Now, I'm not so sure that Chris Ballard is going to be a big spender. Really hasn't been a day one, day two free agent type of guy in the past. That being said, if ever you were going to spend up a little bit, and we all know there's a lot of money they've already shelled out across that offensive line. That being said, you got to do something on that right side because it was pretty damning, especially with the immobile quarterbacks that we had this year anyways. Anybody on that list as we kind of go through it, Drake, for you, anybody that you like interior that you say, hey, I'm willing to throw a bag at them and get them over here to help this football team?
Well, I mean, Isaac Samalo makes perfect sense, and obviously he's got ties with Shane Steichen. He comes from the Eagles, but the thing is, the question mark is Will Fries. You know what's going to happen with Will Fries, and they got to do something in this position because they trusted that Matt Pryor could start at left tackle. They trusted Danny Pinter could start at right guard. And they didn't really push them in training camp, and they both were absolutely no joke on PFF too. The two worst linemen on the entire team. So I don't think that Samalo, as much as it would be a perfect fit, is really a guy that Ballard will spend the money for. I think that you're looking more like at number 4 there, Nate Davis from the Titans. I think that they're going to look at somebody to bring in to push Will Fries to see if he's going to make it happen. And he'll be either a solid backup or they're going to have a veteran guard. Needless to say, though, I mean, those two guys at the top, Ben Powers is a run blocker, and they're going to need to improve the running game again. So the top two are definitely I would love either one of those two guys, but I think realistically, it's probably Nate Davis because they want to push Will Fries and see if he can't keep improving.
Yeah, I mean, Steven, I don't know if anybody stood out to you. Dalton Reisner's on that list as well. I think Drake made a great point. Powers is a pure road grader. And if you're going to be on the Baltimore Ravens football team, you better be able to block, right? Like that's a prerequisite. You can't play on that football team and not be able to block. Their whole team is designed based off of that. Anybody on that list that you would be willing to go? I mean, we can even dig down further in that list if we need to, say, hey, maybe we don't spend up quite as much, but anybody on just that initial list as you're kind of glancing over it that you think in your mind, hey, I wouldn't mind taking a shot on this guy.
Well, it's funny because Drake actually stole the right out from under me. Nate Davis was the name that kind of popped out to me. I love the top names on the list. I do. But I think Drake said it really, really well. I think they're going to look – I don't know if Ballard's going to look to fill with big-time free agents as much as kind of filter in there to push some of the people so he's not in a position like he was last year with Matt Pryor, right? Like he just kind of was like, hey, it's your job. We all debated it all offseason, and he was wrong. Like he was really wrong. He had nothing behind him. I think Nate Davis makes a lot of sense for that, but I think he makes a lot of sense too because you have seen him. He's seen him play. He's seen him firsthand. He's seen what he's capable of, what he's not capable of. And, I mean, he's still a really solid talent. So, I mean, that's one. I mean, outside of the top 3 guys really in the top 1, he's a name that I would look at that it wouldn't shock me. And also, we always joke, look over the history. Colts and the Titans, as much as we hate each other, they trade a lot of talent back and forth, man. They really do. They know each other so well. There's a lot of talent. You can go back to David Thornton and then all the way up to Danico Autry. We trade talent back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. Before we get too heavy in here, we never, ever, ever want to forget you guys, everyone who's joined the No Horsing Around family. Over 2,300 people have decided to subscribe and be a part of this family. It means so much to us. We say it every single time, but it really does matter. Every single interaction, every comment, every time you agree, disagree, we don't really care. That's why we created this platform for you to be able to use your voice. We got Basel in here, Uncouth, Blue Nation, Austin, Unboxing Mania just jumped in there. Sarah hit us with comments. Nomad came around.
Don't forget Nero De Niro's there too.
Nero De Niro, one of my favorite YouTube names of all time. As well as Zen. I believe Zen had a chance to hop in here as well. Blue Nation hits us with that Matt Pryor was garbage. You ain't lying, brother. You ain't lying. But yeah, I mean, definitely something that we're so happy to just have you guys. If you haven't joined this family, we invite you to do that. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button, hit those alerts. So every time we do these live streams, every time we put out new content for you guys, you can feel free, to get that and be first in line when it comes to that. Let's just kind of switch over just on philosophy. Before we go to another position, just overall philosophy. We all know the past of Chris Ballard, right? Like, do we just, in our minds, erase that and say, okay, this is maybe Chris Ballard 2.0. Maybe he looks at things a little bit differently. Or do we look at it from this perspective and say, nah, this is just what Ballard does. Ballard does Ballard things. He's a little bit light in free agency, and don't get your hopes up if you're Colts Nation. Very curious. I'll finish it, but I'm very curious just both of your thoughts. Drake, just Chris Ballard's approach to free agency this year. Might have a little pressure from a guy who's writing those checks, but you just never know. Just thoughts on that.
Well, I think that you saw Ballard's big move last year with Gilmore. I think that what you saw last year was Chris Ballard really, throwing the dollars at somebody. But I think that this is a little different. His seat is hotter now. It's really legitimately hot this time. And so you've got a rookie quarterback that's going to come into town and is going to be there for a while. And you don't want, another situation like the aforementioned prior Pinter thing where your big money guys can't, block because they're just getting ran through on, their left side. And so I think especially with the offensive line, I think that you might even see either them draft a tackle to push Raymond, or I think there was a comment which makes perfect sense. I mean, Fries, he improved at times, but he hasn't made a serious case that he's a starter. You got to make sure that he is. You just do. So I think that this time there's still money on the table. I wish there was more money on the table like the past couple of years, but it's tied up in the offensive line and it's tied up in some superstars on the team. So I think that you're going to see a different type of Ballard, especially at least with the offensive line. He's got to make sure that it's not a recurring disaster like last season was.
Yeah, I mean, very, very good point. Steven, where you at with Chris Ballard? I think everybody who's listening to this podcast, as far as I goes, know all full well. So that's why I'm going last.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you go in with your eyes wide open, right? You go in and it's like every year. I think we hope, that maybe he's a little different. But if you go in with your expectations that he's not going to be much different, you're not going to be disappointed when we get to week 2 of free agency and they're just now signing people. That being said, I will say I think he tweaks a little. I do. I think Drake made a great point. His seat is legitimately hot. Like from outside perspective, now we don't truly know if it's really hot with Irsay, but we assume it is. And he's got some holes that he's got to fill. He has come out now and he has talked about how his philosophy will stay the same, but he does realize it has to change a little. I think everyone who's listened to this show long enough has heard me. I hope that he does he has that adaptability. I use the example, I've used it in the past, of Howie Roseman with the Eagles. Dude got demoted to the other side of the building. He was so bad. And he had to adapt and change on what he did, and he was able to do that. The question is, does Ballard stick to his guns to the point that he's fired because of it? Or does he adapt because, side note, fun note, we all know he built a brand new multi-million-dollar house in Indianapolis. Does he really want to have to sell that after next year?
No way, man.
Good point.
No way. That's a very good point you made. Both of you guys made great points. So here's might be a little bit long-winded, but in my opinion, just free agency philosophy, period. In my opinion, I've never been the type of guy that says you got to go out and just buy everybody, right? Like that's ridiculous. It's non-sustainable. If everyone who knows anything about this cap, and obviously, I guess unless you're the Rams, the cap does apply to all other NFL teams. For some reason, they're able to kind of shock the cap and get around it. But that being said, I've always said you need to get with your pro scout team when it comes to free agencies, and you need to pick a small list, 3, 4, 5 players, and you say, we got to walk away with at least a couple of these guys, right? Like difference makers, not just plug and play type of guys, but guys who actually can elevate this football team. And I think previously what he tries to do, in his opinion, with those difference makers, he goes out and gets a Rodney McLeod, right? Like he goes out and gets players like that who are veterans that last longer. He gets much better deals with those guys. But I think it's time at this point. You're going to draft a rookie quarterback. He's going to be on a rookie deal for the next 5 years. You're going to have to put him in position to have weapons surrounding him. Probably if there ever were a year that Chris Ballard spent in free agency, considering what's happened this year and how it unfolded, I'd say this might be the outlier year where he actually goes out and maybe dips a couple times on day one, day two to just get his guy, right? Like he may say, you know what, I'm just not going to let anybody outbid me on this guy or that guy, because we really do need to upgrade at certain positions when it comes right down to it. But all in all, I've always been this way. I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it, and it just is what it is, as far as that goes. But it will be interesting. It will be interesting. Modern NFL, it's just been blatantly clear to me that you have to have multiple weapons on the offensive side of the football field. There's not a team in the playoffs that went with any distance at all, that didn't have multiple pass catchers, running backs. Most of those teams had 2 running backs that were capable of doing different things and kind of extending plays, as well as you saw the Eagles, had Gainwell and Miles Sanders, kind of a 1-2 punch. Hell, even Boston Scott got involved a little bit when it comes down to it. Now, we clearly have a very good running back. If we can keep them healthy and we can get the right blockers, I mean, I would say, sky could be the limit for Jonathan Taylor. We all know there's a lot of talent when it comes to that. So it should be interesting to see what he does when it comes right down to it.
I've got a question for you. I don't want to go too sidetracked, but you mentioned Jonathan Taylor. I'm just curious because as we're talking about accumulating talent, right? Trying to accumulate talent, there's been a lot of discussion over, I would say, the last 3-4 days or so, when you've looked at Colts Twitter and things like that, of trading Jonathan Taylor instead of paying Jonathan Taylor. Drake, I know you've commented on it because I've read your comments too. Where do y'all sit with that? Would you guys trade him? I'm just curious. I know we're talking about free agency, but this is a big thing.
Sure.
If you get rid of him, like, you're going to have to figure something else out. And it's just a topic that got floated out there that I think got floated out at a low level, and then it raised very quickly to like the Zach Kiefers of the world and Stephen Holder.
Yeah. Drake, you go first, man. Just your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor, the possibility of even trading him. Guys, we're just talking about real loose possibilities here. Don't sit here and think that we're advocating for this necessarily, but just some fun conversation. And you guys hit us up in the comment as well. Drake, where you at with it?
Obviously, I do not agree to any capacity, but I mean, if we're talking about a quarterback who's going into his 3rd, 4th season, knows the NFL well, he's had some success passing the ball, and maybe it hasn't all needed to be on Jonathan Taylor. Maybe you float around that idea, but look, you're bringing in. It's the same thing with Pittman. All right, you're bringing in a guy that needs these weapons. He's got to have these weapons, and this is no knock on Zach Moss, no knock on Deion Jackson or whoever else the Colts might draft. But I mean, outside of Derrick Henry, is there a more pure running back in the NFL? One of my friends coined it perfectly. He said he is lightning in a bottle. Any play he misses, one tackle is missed on him, you could be talking about the house. And there are, I think 2 or 3, you got your Christian McCaffreys, your Derrick Henrys. Well, then there's Jonathan Taylor. I really do think that the running back position can be a committee. It's not as important as it once was, but there's still a couple all-star number 1 guys you just can't let go away. And I would really prefer not to watch 28 in a different jersey running through Colts helmets and scoring touchdowns, and he's not on the Colts team in Lucas Oil Stadium. So I just think that with the given situation of a new coach that excels at getting running backs going, as you saw in Philly, and a coach that is getting a rookie quarterback, you need to keep him. And I think if you let him go, that's boneheaded.
Yeah, man. I mean, 2 things. First of all, I think Chris Ballard absolutely loves Jonathan Taylor. So I'd be very shocked to see if something like that actually happened. But Drake makes some really good points. But my thoughts are, on a team that lacks a little bit of firepower, he's your best player, right? Like I don't know why, we're not a team we're in a complete sell-off like Carolina was last year before they went on that run, or a team that's getting ready to break apart. Like, we've been together for a while and now we know we got to start developing some young players and kind of retool. We need talent. And he is, in my opinion, he is the best playmaker on our football team. And he's the one guy that can really, really be the best friend to your rookie quarterback, right? Hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor seems like a pretty good job. You just hand the ball off to him. Don't overthink it. Let him do what he does. And if he can stay healthy, guys, he had a rough year. This year he was injured. He had an offensive line that just could not block for him. And honestly, if he doesn't go on IR, he probably still cashes in for 1,000 yards. Like, all of that said, he probably still catches in for 1,000 yards, which is almost impossible to believe with the way the offensive line blocked this year. So for me, I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not completely against the idea. Now, if you throw out some just ridiculous package where you're going to give up multiple first-round picks and stuff like that, of course, everybody's got a price when it comes down to it, but I don't think that would happen, especially with Chris Ballard. I think he values Jonathan Taylor a lot, and if I'm being honest, I think he's going to get paid. I think he's going to get a second contract with us. Now, I don't know what that'll be. A lot will depend on his health this year and how he plays in this new offense, but not so sure that that's a good idea, and not so sure that that'll actually happen. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I saw it, and I was listening to the local radio here, and they were talking. It's a different sport. They were talking about the Nashville Predators and things like that, and they're talking about rebuilds, right? And how you start selling off your best players to jumpstart these rebuilds. And everyone talks about rebuild. How many times have we seen in the NFL alone, too, right? Rebuilds that are still happening 6 years later. Like, you sold off all your best players. There's never a guarantee that you're going to be able to capitalize and actually do the rebuild. And I'm with both of you guys. I think the more talent, the better. You are getting ready. It is the worst kept secret in the entire NFL that the Colts are drafting a quarterback, right? Like, as much as Ballard would love for you to believe that they're not, everyone knows they are.
Yeah.
So surround them with as much talent, and what better way than to turn around and give the ball to an all-pro running back. But I'm with you guys too. And Boswell has brought it up a couple times in the chat, is if it's like just this ungodly package, then yeah, you absolutely listen to that. Like, I think he said if it's like Herschel Walker level, right?
Yeah.
Then yes, absolutely. Like, it's an idiotic thing to not listen. But I think you listen to the comments that Ballard made going into the offseason.
Yeah.
He's getting paid. Like, you can read those tea leaves. People are definitely, he's going to get paid. He's not going anywhere. But it was just a really interesting thing that I saw gain a lot of momentum, not momentum, but a lot of eyeballs on Colts Twitter over like the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Unboxing Mania asked, do you guys think that Ballard or Steichen will disregard Young because of his size? It's a great question. It really is. It's a question, if I'm being honest, I've thought in my head, not so much Steichen, but Ballard. We all know that Ballard has this threshold for height, weight, build metrics that he goes for, wingspan, athletic ability, explosiveness. I would say there's a decent possibility that he could pass on a guy like Bryce Young just because of his stature and his build. Who knows? There's no way we can get. I wish I was a fly on the wall for those conversations that are probably happening right now when it comes to those rookie quarterbacks. For me, it doesn't matter. Everybody knows that I'm team Bryce Young. Everybody probably who listens to Drake knows he's team Anthony Richardson. Everybody who listens to Steven knows he's team CJ Stroud. But, as far as that goes, I don't know. But I do think it's a real possibility. I think it exists. And I think that's conversation that all teams who are drafting in that top 10 are going to be asking about Bryce Young. But I keep going back to one thing, and I always have, and I probably always will, unless I'm convinced otherwise. He's the only player that we're not really debating his ability on the football field. We're only debating his size, right? Like, he is special on the football field, but how does that translate to the NFL? So for me, I trade up, I take a chance, but like I said, that's going to be for another one. Hey, we appreciate that, Sarah, for that super sticker right there. How about that? Drake, Chris Ballard, will he pass on Bryce Young just because of the size? Thoughts, just opinions, just whatever, just some random collection of thoughts that you have when you hear that question.
Well, actually, there was an article done by, on our channel on the Horseshoe Huddle. Zach Hicks really laid out why he could succeed, actually, in Shane Steichen's offense. And it would be quick throws. It would be real, getting him easy opportunities, getting the ball to playmakers in space. I will say this. Look, I might be a high traits guy, but the thing is, to deny Bryce Young, and I'll stand on this, to deny Bryce Young because of his size, I think is ridiculous. I think that I'll quote everybody that's ever said this. If he has 2 or 3 more inches on his frame, and if he has 5 to 10 more pounds on his build, he is in fact, I've heard you guys say this on the show, you especially, Zach, he is the consensus #1 pick. And you'll probably see a bunch of teams losing their minds to trade up to get him. And we're not even having this discussion if he's 6'1", 6'2", maybe even 6 feet. But everyone's like, oh, he's 5'10", 5'11". I do think that there's been sources close to Ballard, especially one of his proteges, Lance Zierlein, actually said, no way is he going to go get this guy. But I think that when push comes to shove, if he's watching tape and Shane Steichen's like, look, I like him, well, maybe that changes things. I think there's a possibility he becomes a Colt, and I think that he might be. Him and Stroud are probably the most pro-ready guys of the bunch. So I think it's ridiculous to put his size against him. He might go out there and light up the league and prove everybody wrong.
Yeah, man. Steven, where are you at with that? Just Ballard philosophy, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Taking a little bit of what you're saying, taking a little bit of what Drake's saying. I mean, I think it's a possibility. I mean, and I would say this too. We've said this. We absolutely, Drake is 100% correct. You add 3 inches to his height and to 5-10 pounds extra, he's the consistent #1 overall pick. But I don't know too many people who suddenly gain 3 inches of height when they're older like this, right? Like that's the sucky part for him is he is where he is. I do like Bryce Young a lot. I do think there's a chance. I think the chance is, can someone convince him of it? That's the chance, right? Like we've all heard the Kenny Moore story. It took a lot of people to convince Ballard to go get Kenny Moore because he didn't meet his criteria for what a corner was. It's gonna. I think it's gonna take probably Steichen beating the table for him to probably want him to be like, he's going to look. I just think he's the kind of guy who's going to look over the history of the league, and there's going to be serious concerns that, one wrong. I think it was in the chat too. One free blitzer on the blind side, it's a broken rib, man. I mean, because he's just not. I'm not too concerned about his height as much as we've talked so much as his weight. That's what concern. I know he's trying to put weight on.
Yeah.
But then the question that we've always talked about is, what does that do to his game? Can his frame handle being 205, 210, whatever it is? And a lot of people will comp him to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's thick. Like he's a sturdy dude. But do I think that if Steichen was like, this is my guy, he's going to run my offense better than anybody, that will carry a lot of weight, I think. Because I do think in the end, too, when we've talked so much about the coaching, but I think Steichen was, I think Irsay liked him, and he was Ballard's guy. So I think if he were to sit there and go, this is the guy that can run my offense and get us to the Super Bowl, Ballard will listen. Does he do it? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, honestly, what might kick it out at the very end is, and you made a great point, Steven, is the build. Not as much the size, just the small frame. I don't know, man. I just don't worry about it. I think he's the best player, and I think you got to take the best player because, you're not going to be in this position very often. You hope you're not in this position very often, right? If you're drafting in the top 5 very often, that means you're a pretty bad football team. So we're not shooting for that. And I just think that at the end of the day, to me, he's the most special. But I'm not going to be mad if the Indianapolis Colts run in the name C.J. Stroud. I'm totally okay with something like that. I just think he's just a little bit better when it goes to that. Let's switch on over to some wide receiver talk. Drake, do you have something?
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to address what Deep said here. So, Greg, I was waiting for this to happen. It's actually, I said Lance Zerline, who is a guy who protéged underneath Chris Ballard, and he's a draft expert. And on a show, they said, hey, they were talking, I can't remember which show it was, but they had Lance Zerline on. And they said, what are the chances that the Colts are going to trade up to get Bryce Young? And he goes, everything I know about Chris, he doesn't like these small frame guys. It's one of Chris's closest guys, basically became like viral because he said, look, he's not taking him. That's basically what he said. So again, does that hold the weight if Shane Steichen pounds the table like Steven said? Maybe, but I do think that if he does get drafted, it's because Steichen really pushed hard for him.
Yeah, I think all great points. Let's just transition over to wide receiver, a little bit of free agency talk. As I was going through this list, guys, I'll be honest with you, I'm not just overwhelmed by any of these these options, but there are some good value people. I mean, Jacoby Myers is ranked number 1 on PFF. Definitely can stretch the field. He was not utilized like you would be utilized in more modern NFL offenses, in my opinion, because we all know the Patriots just do it a little bit different, right? So it'd be intriguing. Juju's out there. For me, I'm out on Juju, man. That's not my thing. Odell Beckham Jr. That's going to be the wild card, right? Like, he's ranked 3rd here, but if he plays at 90% potential, he's easily the best wide receiver free agent acquisition. Just what would somebody be willing to pay? And I'm curious, you guys give it in the chat as well. What would somebody be willing to pay Odell Beckham Jr.? Like, is somebody willing to go A, long-term, and B, like, is this guy going to get high-level money again to play in the NFL when we know all of these injuries? Clearly a lot of talent, but a lot of question marks. And I think one of the questions I would have in the back of my brain is, does Odell Beckham Jr. even want to play football anymore? Like, is he kind of transitioned in a weird phase in his career where he's just tired of getting beat up and he really just doesn't care as much about football as he did at one point? Drake, Odell Beckham Jr., Jacoby Myers, Juju, anybody on this list that stands out and you think, hey, that might be a good fit in a Colts uniform next year?
I think, I've got the guy that I think would be perfect for the Colts, but I do like the idea of an OBJ because, you got a rookie quarterback, and if he can even stay a little bit healthy, he might be a nice slot piece. I do not think that he gets big money anywhere. I think that he is going to be a depth piece for a team probably more like the Cowboys. Could probably use him really well. Jacoby Myers, maybe, but actually, if you would scroll down to number 7, that is probably the guy that I think the Colts should sign. Let's see, what's that name? Oh, there he is. Yeah, let's just bring back Paris Campbell. It's pretty simple here. Just bring him back. He had a full season, basically a rookie season, with 3 different quarterbacks, none of which played well. I think that he's a nice slot piece, and I think that Steichen's going to be able to maximize his talent and turn him into the burner that he was drafted to be. And that's really a deep threat, like a guy that can burn you down the field.
Great point. Steven?
Well, that got me, man. You got me on that one. I was scrolling down because I was like, I wasn't sure
who's this going to be.
Well, I knew there was a guy on the list that I like that was really close to that. But I love that idea. Everyone knows who watches this show long enough. Like, I thought he was going to 1,000 yards. Like, I've beat my chest for Paris Campbell for, like, I think probably the last 2 years, Zach.
Yes.
Give or take, somewhere around there, if he could stay healthy. I love Paris Campbell, and I think he would excel in the Steichen offense. A name, I don't like the idea of OBJ. I think I agree with you guys. I don't think he's going to get big money. I don't know how and I know you want some of that rub, but I don't know how he would mesh. I don't think he would want to be here anyway, working with a rookie quarterback. I like right above Paris Campbell. I actually like Alan Lazard. It's a name that intrigues me a little bit. He's played with a really good quarterback. He's a little bit older, not too old still. He does have a little bit of burst. He had a little bit of a case of kind of the drops, this year, a little bit more and more. But you wonder how much was he just tired of being in Green Bay, right, and dealing with the Aaron Rodgers circus. But man, Drake got me on that one, man. I mean, if I had to pick one, I'm all for a team bring back Paris Campbell. I think he showed healthy, and not what was no more wide receiver end arounds, right? Like, don't do that stuff.
Yeah.
He's healthy. He played, and he was extremely talented, and he showed kind of what he could do. I like that. Some of the other names on there, like Michael Thomas. I don't like that one. I don't know what you get with him. The dude's not played football in 2 years.
Yeah.
Some of the names on there, it's not a star-studded list. The question for me would be, is there, to piggyback on the receiver, right? Is there a receiver that you would try to make a trade for? Kind of a la, not Tyreek Hill, but like that trade where you go and you get the guy that you feel like might be a missing piece a little bit who could help. Is that guy out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I'd say in most typical years, yes. But do you really have the assets to trade for that wide receiver and still be able to put yourself in position if you want to go up to number 1 in the draft, right? Like, you probably give those assets away in order to go out there and get that wide receiver. So in typical years, I probably would say, yeah, because I mean, you got guys like obviously DeAndre Hopkins may be available. Robert Woods just hit the market. I'm kind of, whatever with him. I think he's kind of, I think you wait and see. I don't see a team jumping, and just clamoring to sign a Robert Woods. I think he's solid, but he's not going. He's at the back end of his career as well. He was just okay. I think he had 50 catches this year, which just do what Drake said and just bring back Paris Campbell on a 1-year deal, see what he can do. Then if he's healthy, then you may be looking at locking up a guy for a long-term deal. I don't like the idea of giving Paris Campbell a multi-year deal, like a 3, 4, 5-year deal. Just, I know he had one season. I know he played fairly well down the stretch, but I just need to see it one more time. I just need to see him get on that field and be able to withstand what it takes to play week in and week out in the NFL. And very well might do that. You just never know. It depends on what Shane Steichen, sees and can kind of vision him as well. Steven, I think we're going to probably finish this with cornerback position, a position that I'm intrigued by because that's also a pretty star-studded, talented crop. Going to look down and go over some names. Jamel Dean is on there. James Bradbury, obviously, another connection with the Eagles. Cameron Sutton is on there. Jonathan Jones, Patrick Peterson, a little bit older. You've even got Rock Ya-Sin on there. I'm not going that route. Byron Murphy is an intriguing one. Marcus Peters, a veteran, and probably would pass on that one. But the guy I want to highlight, and he's going to be on the thumbnail, is Jamel Dean, just because he's so solid on both ends. He can play pass coverage. He can run stop. But he has that build that Chris Ballard likes. We all know Chris Ballard likes those big, long, physical style cornerbacks. And he is the guy. I mean, he's the prototype in a Chris Ballard defense, whether that be Gus Bradley running that defense or who the hell knows is going to be running that defense. But we'll find that out. But I think Jamel Dean for sure. You got to like what Bradbury was able to do. I know he got a lot of slack for that holding call. But all in all, I mean, James Bradbury's been pretty good his time in the NFL. So those are a couple guys that really jump out. And if you really want to go big and swing and say, you know what, we got Gilmore on one side, we can bring this other guy on the other side. And that would be pretty formidable. If you were able to pull off somebody at the top end there. Anybody on that list, Drake, that stands out to you as far as at the cornerback position?
Well, I mean, I really do. I really do think that Bradbury makes a lot of sense because he was an Eagle. And I do think that he played very well. He will be 30 when the league years or when the regular season does start. So I think if you're trying to say, hey, we've already got Gilmore, yeah, he played well, but how many quarter? I mean, kind of like Steven had mentioned, the history of the league earlier. Well, let's look back. I mean, 30-plus-year-old corners, they tend to, fall off the crop pretty quickly. And the thing is, Gilmore was, I think, an outlier to that. I think if you're going to go younger, I do like Jamel Dean, but a guy that's a huge dark horse candidate that I don't think is even going to be available to the Colts, but that would be a great addition would be Cameron Sutton. Number 3, he's 27 years old. So is Dean. He's like 26. I think those are the guys you want, because what if Kenny Moore does get traded? You got to fill that position. I also think that there's a lot of guys in the draft that you don't have to jump for that could also fill that position. But like you said, Jamel Dean fits that huge physical size, kind of like they say here in this article. He does tend to jump routes sometimes, but if you have the right defensive scheme, you can cover it over the top. So I would go with 1 or 3. I'd either go with Jamel Dean, who's way more realistic, or I would take a shot at a guy like Cameron Sutton, who's the high ceiling dude, who's 26, 27, and probably still in his prime.
Yeah. Stephen, before you comment, just want to be a quick shout out to ATV45. Adam, thanks for hopping on here, man. Tyrell, love seeing you back here, brother. Where you at with the cornerback position, Stephen?
So, I mean, I like them both. I like 1 and 2, right? I like Dean. I like Bradbury. My question for Bradbury would be, my only thing is, with him being an Eagle, would we think that he might be more linked to go out to Arizona with his former coordinator as opposed to the offensive side? But I do like him a lot. My question with Dean is, how realistic is he? Because I think when you sent, I'm peek behind the curtain, like when you sent me the stuff about you wanted Dean on the thing, I started kind of looking a little bit more, and I think the rumor around is that he's probably going to get tagged by the Bucs. So that's another one. But I mean, I don't think you can go wrong. I truly don't think you can go wrong with either one of them. I think that they would be a solid addition. I think even though he wasn't on the same side of the ball as Steichen, right? I think Bradbury would be able to bring over some of what that culture was like over there. And I mean, like I said, even though he's on the opposite side of the ball, he got to kind of, you see all of that. So, I mean, he's probably my pick. And then I would just double dip. I'd get him, and then I think you look to draft, right? Like you look to draft. We're talking free agency, but we're obviously everyone. I mean, the 3 of us aren't stupid when it comes to Ballard's not going to look to fill he's never looked to free agency to fill some of the holes, let alone all of them. I mean, I've not looked into the draft. Zach, you're way better than I am. I'm sure there's corners in the draft that they're gonna target too.
Yeah, I mean, very good point, Stephen. I just don't know. I definitely agree with Drake. If they're going to go that route and they're going to sign somebody long-term, it's definitely going to be one of the younger guys. There's no question. I mean, you have to do it that route. Now, you might want to say, hey, Ballard loves signing those 1 and 2 year deals with older guys, though. He's always loved doing that. I'm not a big fan of the 1 year deal. I like 2 year deals because that gives you flexibility, and that doesn't really pigeonhole you into, accelerating that process where you have to draft that position or you have to go out and sign somebody or overpay. So Bradbury maybe on a 2 year deal, pay him a lot of money, but he's only going to get a 2 year deal. Maybe I like that. That makes sense. But I'd probably still go Jamel Dean, if it's me. Now, you mentioned earlier that they may very well get franchise tagged. I just think that would be weird to me. Like, why you're in a kind of a rebuild. You just lost Tom Brady as your quarterback. You're probably going to make some cap casualties. I don't know why you franchise tag a guy, in that position. I just think that money – you're either going to sign it, you're either going to work out a deal with him, or he's going to be able to test free agency. That's just my personal opinion. But who the heck knows what all of these general managers are thinking when it comes right down to it, as far as that goes. Guys, I want to see if we can get through some of the. Stephen, do we have any comments that we can pop back up here?
There's been a lot.
Let's just go back a little bit and see if there's a couple. Do you guys see any Eagles players that could sign in free agency with us? I think we've mentioned a few. earlier. I mean, anytime you got a new coach, he comes from there. Obviously, they're going to connect the dots and they're going to sit there and say, clearly, the people are going to talk about Eagles players. It may be so because they have some talent there, but I don't think he's just going to go get Eagles to get Eagles. They have to be the right fit. The price has to make sense. Who knows? He may go out and get a Bradbury, a Samola, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see as far as that goes. Let's go back down to, I thought there was a comment that I wanted.
Or Gardner Minshew if you need a veteran to mentor.
And that's probably the more realistic one, if we're being honest. That's probably the guy that I guess my question would be, does Gardner want to come and get buried on a roster and basically say he wants to be a backup moving forward? Or does he want to try and go and compete? Who would know? He seems like the ultimate competitor. I'd have absolutely no problem bringing that guy in to be our backup, because if your rookie gets hurt, or if you want to take the approach where you kind of groom that young quarterback and he doesn't start necessarily week one, you got a little bit of confidence that a guy can go out there and play football for you. Gardner Minshew, Drake, obviously you brought him up. I'll let you have the floor. Just your thoughts on him and what he could be on this football team and how he could help moving forward.
Well, to make it very brief, you're talking about Ryan and Foles. They're gone. All right. They both are not a fit for this team. And the thing is, you're going to free up a lot of space by cutting them before that deadline. And then is Ellinger really a veteran? No, he's still finding himself. He's still developing himself. So I don't think that if a rookie is struggling, he's going to go, "Hey, Sam, what do I do?" I think that Gardner would be a better fit. And also, I look a little too far into things sometimes in the NFL, but I will say that Shane Steichen mentioned him by name in his press conference. And obviously, Jalen Hurts isn't coming to Indianapolis. So I think that it could be a possibility where he's like, "Look, come here, we'll get you on a deal, a 1-year deal or so." And, if it is a guy like Levis or Richardson, on the off chance they pick one of those guys and they want to groom him, well, I think that he would much more trust Gardner Minshew to do that than he would, Sam Ellinger, even though he will probably still be on the team.
Yeah, I mean, Gardner Minshew, Stephen Burton, like it, love it, hate it.
I don't hate it. I mean, we're talking what in the carousel of veteran quarterbacks. I think at some point or another he was probably mentioned as someone that we would want to bring in and let him just roll, let him see how he does. He's a magnetic personality, so I think that the locker room would love him. I feel. I think he's also he played that role really well with Trevor Lawrence, right? Like he kind of, I'm not going to say groomed because he kind of lost the job to him, or I don't know how you lose the job to the number 1 overall pick, but that's just Urban Meyer, I guess, right? So, I mean, I think he's very magnetic. I like the idea of it. He's definitely the first name because I think Drake and Zach, you guys both hit it on the head. I mean, man, there's a very real possibility that entire quarterback room is different, that they're all 3 gone because of how bad it was. I think someone mentioned on the timeline, when you're a 4-win team, should we be upset about losing anybody? When it comes to a room that was on the side of the ball that was historically bad, right? Like, should we be crying over, if they don't keep Ellinger as the 3rd string quarterback? Probably not, and so, I mean, I like the idea of it. I don't think it would hurt. I don't think it'd cost a lot. I think that, even if you were to draft a CJ Stroud or like a Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, there's still the chance. I mean, they do need to be kind of developed, but there's still a very real chance they get tossed in right away, right?
Yeah.
Like they might just go right into it and just say, hey, take your lumps and let's see what happens. And you do have then you would have a reliable, solid backup if something were to happen, right? Like, but you do also buy yourself the time, the ability to maybe give them, 4 games, 5 games before you do insert them into the starting lineup.
Yeah, I have absolutely no qualms.
And I want to say one thing too, Zach, before, I'm sorry. Basil mentioned that his you popped it up. He said that his comments, he was upset because his comments weren't up because they're comedy gold. They are comedy gold. They are not monetization gold. Sometimes watch what you say, man. I can't pop up some of the stuff you say.
Yeah, man, we love him. He comes on, he gives us he's about as real as it gets when
They're
you
good
come
comments there
on these live streams. There's no doubt about that. I know Manny said, hey, Dad. So, shout out to Stephen Burton. Got the kiddo hopping on here. Pretty cool.
Yeah, she hasn't photobombed in quite some time, has she?
Yeah, I know it's
been too old and too cool for it.
Let's don't pull that chain again. You know what I mean? Let's see if we can, go.
She's too old and too cool for it now.
Yeah. Didn't want to be on camera. A little bit shy as far as that goes. Wanted to take a quick second. Drake, you got a lot of stuff going on over there at the Horseshoe Huddle. Wanted to just let people who are listening here on this show that haven't had a chance to find you, how can they find you? What do you guys got going on over there? I know you got a lot of stuff, continually getting content, writing, and everything. Just let them know what they can expect and where they can see you at.
Well, it's obviously there's the Twitter handle at @DWalsterDrake, and we added a couple guys, Shad McGinnis and Destin Adams. They have their own show that just happened tonight, Saddle Up podcast. But myself and my co-host at Andrew Moore, NFL, we do the Horseshoe Huddle every Monday and every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And my piece is like, I just wrote one on should the Colts trade Shaq Leonard? And here's an inside scoop. I argue that they should not. So that's something. But there's going to be a lot of content coming out on these hires. Everyone's talking about, Bubba Ventrone right now. I know that's a huge concern, as it is for me too. But go to YouTube, check out the Horseshoe Huddle, go to my tag here on Twitter. There's constant stuff that I'm writing about. I like to be a busy guy and always get content out. So definitely go check that out. And let me know if you hate it. Let me know if you like it. I always like to hear any opinion I can hear.
Absolutely, man. Well, guys, this has been a really, really good time. We've had a good, healthy discussion. More free agency talk to come as we go around. FOS, shout out to you, man. Brayton, thanks for hopping on there. Sarah, thanks for the sticker. We appreciate that. We always have so much fun doing these live streams because we get a chance to see all of these personalities come out. And it's really, really, really been cool to have Drake on here tonight as well. If you guys haven't had a chance, go check him out one more time, Horseshoe Huddle. As soon as you get off this, just go over there and subscribe. Don't even think about it, man. You'll love the content.
Hit the bell too. Yeah, I know I don't miss them when they go live.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. There you go. And we spoke too soon, and we got
no.
as it goes.
Boom.
We pulled the chain. But Steven, like you always do, send us out, brother.
Yes. It's always fun, right? Like I think we've topped out at a certain amount of people, 53 people. People still joining as we're ending, right? So it's always fun. It's always great to have Drake on. Like Zach said, go over, check out his stuff. Definitely. Hey, I'm super excited. Shad is a good friend of mine. I still text. I still talk with him a lot. So I'm excited to see him over there with you guys too. But yeah, man, trudge through it. Next week will be fun because we got the combine, right? Like the combine's coming up. We got a lot of fun stuff. Combine, pro days, draft, free agency. So just keep your chin up, keep going. And me and Zach said the same thing. I love you. I know Zach loves you. Pretty sure Drake loves you too. We're out of here.
Absolutely.
Go Colts.